What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.
Hello, AVAIYA family. I am Brielle Starr, online education coordinator for AVAIYA. AVAIYA is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you so much for joining us. Our fellow teacher, Katie Asmus, is with us today to talk about somatic and nature-based practices to support nervous system regulation. Katie is the founder of the Somatic Nature Therapy Institute, where she blends present moment awareness, body mind connection, nature based practices, and ceremony to support people in healing trauma and more deeply and compassionately connecting to themselves, others, and the earth. Welcome back to AVAIYA, Katie.
Thank you so much. So good to be here and support this incredible mission that you all are up to in the world.
Yes, we're so glad to have you here. We're so glad to have you be a part of this mission and sharing this education with the world. So, thank you for being here with us at Avaya yet again today.
Yes.
And yeah, since you do so much work in the realms of somatics and nature-based realms of things, based on your work as a somatic and nature-based psychotherapist and educator, what do you believe creates nervous system healing?
Ooh, that is such a great question. So, as a somatic psychotherapist, and everything I do is absolutely 100% through the lens of body-mind connection. And as based on that, my perspective is that so much of what influences our nervous system are our circumstances, our past circumstances. As a therapist, I work with trauma and attachment issues, ongoing experiences of stress that we've been in, as well as current circumstances. And we know that the nervous system and the brain are malleable, that we have neuroplasticity until we die. And so, although there are many different things that can influence the state of our nervous system, I really believe that finding our own personal ways of shifting states, of bringing more calm, ease, groundedness, regulation is the key because we can impact our nervous systems through our environment, through our practices, through our thinking. And each of us is unique and individual in what actually is working or resourcing for us. So that's really what I do with my clients is help them find what are your ways, what helps you to state shift to something that is more regulated.
Yes, fabulous. Thank you for giving us a little bit of background about how you are working with others and supporting them. And I like this idea of how it can be kind of unique depending on what someone needs for their own state to shift into a new state. And so I'd love if you could tell us some more about this role of resourcing that you mentioned and why you find that to be so important.
Yes. So in the bedrock of all of the work that I do, I say is resourcing. And for me, what that means is the process or practice of state shift to something that is more regulated, calmer, maybe happy, good, easeful, or I like to say just better than you felt before. So you might not even feel really good, but maybe having a little bit of relief from anxiety or depression or something else that is feeling really uncomfortable. And in the way that I experience the nervous system and working with trauma, is that when we've experienced something that's been hard or scary, right, that we call trauma, essentially we haven't had enough safety or support in ourselves and our environment to be able to really move through the fear, move through the fight, flight, freeze response, which is a whole response that is neurochemical, that is, woven in with our nervous system. When we can move that through, there's a big wave, and that wave ends in regulation, relief, exhale. When we don't have that safety in ourselves or in the environment, what happens is we hold this in, and the result is a dysregulated state. When we stay in that over time, that becomes more of a baseline. We start walking around the world, seeing things through this felt sense state. We start perceiving danger. And so for me, when I'm working with trauma, and I use that word on a spectrum, so that could be from a little t trauma they call to a big T trauma, that what happens is our body itself then becomes the danger, right? This is what we don't want to feel. And so we have to create all these different ways of dissociating from our own body, from our own felt sense, which actually is creating more anxiety and dysregulation typically. So, with resourcing, again, the practice of shifting states to something that is better, for me, I always begin with people there because theoretically, most people want to feel good or better. They don't want to feel bad. And so we start to look at how do you shift your state? And when you shift your state, or when you have an experience that is good or that is more grounded, can you tolerate feeling that in your body? And so the work is how do we shift states? And then how do we start to tolerate hanging out, being present with sensations that are good? And so, as we introduce that over time, what happens is we start to create different habits in our nervous system, different possibilities, and feel like we have more choice and power to actually have an impact on our own nervous systems.
Yes, beautifully said. I love what you mentioned there just now at the end about how we actually have more power to work with our nervous systems. And so, could you tell us just a little bit more about how you facilitate this concept of resourcing and what it really looks like as you're working with people?
Yes. And I also teach therapists and healers. So in fact, as you asked that question, I have a whole model. But the first thing that I do when I meet with people is I have them make a list of their resources. And I have three categories that I have them consider: internal resources, external resources, and spiritual or transpersonal resources. So we literally make a list. Sometimes I have them send them home to do this and come back, bring it back. Sometimes we do that right in the session. And internal resources are anything about ourselves that we like, that helps us get through. And that could be anything from our own sense of humor or a sense of love of nature, or it could be my body is strong. So, what is it that helps you in the world that you appreciate? External resources, people, places, things, anything in our lives that when we think about it, when we're connected to it, it brings a state, feeling that we like, that is good. And then spiritual or transpersonal, I think about things in our lives that help us feel more expanded or connected to something greater. So for some people, that is might be spirituality, religion. For other people, that might be connection with nature or music or maybe even plant medicine. But what actually helps us again in our states feel something good? So I have them make that list, and I get to really know, what are these things, and then we can start to weave those into our work in as we're working together. And sometimes if people have a hard time regulating or resourcing, the first thing we'll do is really just keep our eyes open and look around the room or look out the window, look outside if we're outside, and find something that is visually pleasing or is pleasing to one of our senses. Because if it's hard to access something inside, typically there is something outside of us that we like. And just putting our attention on that takes attention away from whatever it is that is distressing us, which gives our body mind a little break from focusing on the distress. And in and of itself, through that focus, starts to shift the nervous system. And then, depending on people's resources, there are a lot of go-tos. Often for people, it's their pet, like thinking about their dog or their dog laying on their lap, or maybe a loved one being here with them, or maybe there's a movement that feels good. And so, after we make this big list, what I like to do is hone, what are the 2 to 4 go-to resourcing experiences for someone that they have most access to. And then when we're doing therapy work or coaching work, really, I like to go back to those core resourcing experiences over and over and over again, because I feel like one, the more we do that, the more our body mind remembers that state shift, remembers that association like a ritual, right? And the quicker it will start to shift, the more that we do that, again, the quicker that it will shift. And the more often that we do the same thing, the more my clients are going to remember to do that on their own outside of the session. So many therapists, when I'm working with them, especially new therapists, will say, I already taught my client that particular exercise. And I always say, that's okay. Do it again and again and again and again, because it's way more likely that when someone's having anxiety, they're going to remember, oh, I do that thing. We do that thing when I'm in therapy, and they'll do it on their own. So that's really the essence and kind of the way that I approach it in the work that I do with people.
Yeah, amazing. I loved hearing about the way that you approach it and the way that you're working with people, and especially what you said there about that repetition and actually using those tools over and over again, especially then it can transfer more easily into our everyday lives and become a more natural habit, even it sounds like.
Yes.
And I'd love to come back around as well to you mentioned sometimes some people have a really challenging time regulating or resourcing, and you mentioned how we can then look outside of us into our outer world. Why,
Yeah.
in the first place, might someone be having a really tricky time, perhaps even just recognizing or understanding their own resources or regulating in general?
Yeah, well, I think, like I shared earlier, so many different things impact our nervous system kind of baseline or state. And again, from a trauma perspective, and I know not everything is trauma, but that is so much of what I work with people, is that when people show up at my door, they have often been in a state of anxiety, depression, dysregulation of some sort for a while, and they've gotten to a point where they say, I need some help shifting out of this. And so I think the longer that we're in a situation, and that could be a situation that is not ideal, right? That is abusive or disrespectful, or just that we don't have enough resources to live, then our nervous systems can very easily get into a state of survival or scanning for the danger or self-protection. And so when that becomes habit, then we really need to start to work with, okay, this has been a habit now. Your nervous system knows this other state. We really need to help it remember, what does it feel like to shift states? What does it feel like to regulate? And so when that has become the habit, it's not, our brains are wired to survive and to stay alive. They are wired to look for the danger. They're not wired to look for the good. But we absolutely have the capacity. So it's like going to the gym and doing reps. Often we do need to say, okay, maybe that's not what I don't wake up feeling like, yeah, I want to go do some exercise, or I want to go, do some focus exercises. But when we start to do that and find state shift, find regulation, something completely different can happen. And again, people get to see that there is choice and capacity to influence that.
Amazing. Thank you so much for diving in a little bit deeper there and explaining that for us.
Yes.
And
Awesome.
yeah, shifting gears a little bit, I know you talk a lot about this nature connection in your work, and that's such a big part of your work. So could you tell us some more about how you bring that nature connection in when you're supporting clients in this nervous system regulation?
Yes, absolutely. So, like I shared, all of my work is body-mind connection. And then a big chunk of it also includes nature connection, because for many people, there are some really positive experiences and associations with the natural world. That's not true for everybody. So, I always give people choice. But the thing that I love the most about working in collaboration with the natural world with nervous system regulation is it is alive, it is dynamic, it engages all of our senses. And when we've experienced trauma, that's something that's happened in the past. And when we're having that kind of nervous system activation response, what's happening is we're often responding to something in the past or responding to our fears of the future. And when we're engaged with the natural world, it really calls us into the present moment. It calls us into noticing what is right in front of us here now. And sometimes that is pleasant or filled with awe. And that's often what I'm going for. Is like find something that's drawing your attention because what that does is it brings blood flow to the frontal cortex. We're noticing, and it brings blood flow away from the reptilian brain, the midbrain, the areas of the brain where that kind of ongoing activation gets habituated, really. So it starts to help us shift states by putting our attention on something in the present moment. And then, two, in an ideal world, something that's pleasing. So then it starts to impact how we feel, what we notice, etc. So there's so many ways that that present moment engagement, the focus engagement, often the pleasure, the dynamicness, all really supports people in shifting states that sometimes they have a really hard time doing, just sort of closing their eyes and imagining things, which can also really be powerful for some people, but also hard for others.
Yes, lovely. Thank you so much for sharing some more about that. And I'm interested in this concept of imagining, like you just said, and how that could be challenging for some people. Could you just tell us a little bit more about what you mean by imagining and what that could look like?
Yes. So I use working with the imaginal a lot in my work. And often when people hear that word, they think imagery. I mean, that points to imagery. But also, many clients will say, I have a hard time doing imagery. Like, I don't get the imagery. So when I say the imaginal, I will often expand it with my clients and I'll say, imagine or remember being at that place that you told me that is has good memories, sitting by the creek. And you might get an image of that. You might remember the sound. You might remember the smell or what it feels like there. So I really like to expand the senses that people might remember from that place. And I also ask my clients, what do you notice when you remember that place? And then I really speak to the senses that are stronger for them. And studies show, I mean, this is kind of the basis of sports psychology, really, that when we imagine something, this similar neuro firing, the similar muscle firing happens as if we're actually doing it. And so that's like with sports psychology, when you imagine shooting the perfect, basketball layup or something, then literally your muscle is developing muscle memory. So similar but different with resourcing when we can remember, work in the imaginal, either something that we have done, something somewhere we have been, a good experience, then often what happens is our neurology and our physiology begins to shift when we think of that thing, or we can imagine something in the future. So, one of the bodies of work that I do is EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And one of the key interventions in that for everyone is imagining a calm place or a good place to help really kind of shift states at the end of that process. And interesting, like 9 out of 10 people I would say choose somewhere in nature. And what that is just imagining being there. And we always say it could be a place you've really been that you have a relationship with, or it could be a place that just comes up in your imagination. And it doesn't matter because, again, what we put our attention on, what we put our focus on grows and impacts our neurophysiology. And again, because our brains and our nervous systems are so wired to look for danger, we really, really need to find practices that work for each of us uniquely, so that we can actually work that muscle of state shift.
Yes. Lovely. It was really interesting to hear some more about that. So I'm so glad that you shared a little bit more about this concept of imagination and how we can actually use this to begin that state shift, like you shared about.
Yeah,
And
thanks.
As kind of just an overarching question for today, what would be your biggest advice to listeners who want to embark on this journey to heal their nervous system and or support others in the process?
Great. Well, first is just knowing that it is possible, really knowing that, again, throughout our whole lives, we can shift our nervous system, shift our brains, that it is a part of us that is malleable. And so to have hope, and then also to get help potentially if it feels hard on your own. And that could be a book, that could be a podcast, that could be maybe working with a therapist or joining a group or because there are so many people out there that really are understanding this more and more at this stage. And then I think really set yourself up for success. So find the things that work for you and how you're actually going to follow through with that. So some people say, okay, I'm going to meditate every morning, and they do it. They sit down, they do it every morning. I am not one of those people. I need to get more, pair my good habits with something else in the morning. Maybe go on a walk right after I make my tea and start to make that a habit. Or maybe join a group or a class that's really going to help me start to do these practices, explore these practices. So I think find the things, it could be sitting and again, petting your dog for 5 minutes or watching your child play and just taking some moments to stop and pause and linger and really savor those good moments. So those would be the key pieces that I would share with others.
Beautiful. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Did you have
I'll
another?
also add for practitioners, I'm very biased, as you can tell with everything I've said, but I always say if you become as a therapeutic practitioner, a master of resourcing with your clients, again, I feel like that is the bedrock of all healing because when we're in a state of activation, it's hard to take in nourishment of any type, whether that's medicine, whether that's the good that's around us in the world. So that would be my invitation to practitioners.
Lovely. Thank you for adding that in as well. And yeah, I loved hearing some of those different suggestions. And so many of them are just so practical and things that are actually pretty easy, relatively easy to apply and incorporate in our lives. So thank you for that, Katie.
You're welcome.
I would love if we could talk a little bit about how people can dive deeper with you and the beautiful work that you're doing in the world. I know you have a guided meditation, and we have a button leading over to that down below if you'd like to share about that and any of your other resources.
Great, thank you. So, yes, I created for your listeners a guided meditation that supports them in state shift. And so it's just a guided meditation around thinking about different resources and beginning to notice the impact in their body. So that is below. And I also wrote up a description. So for those who like to read about it and maybe even do it on their own, they can do it that way. And so I have many offerings. I think you mentioned at the beginning, Somatic Nature Therapy Institute is what I created in my work. And so I do psychotherapy. I have many other practitioners in our group practice they're all trained in somatic therapy and nature-based therapy by me. And so there's that. We also do nervous system coaching. So sometimes when people are out of state, we can't work with them in therapy, but we'll work with them maybe 2 to 10 sessions and help them learn to resource, learn to state shift, gain some tools. And then I offer a 9-month somatic soul-based trauma and attachment training for practitioners, for therapeutic practitioners that is online. The next one begins October 8th. And that is the beginning of that is all resourcing as a practitioner, teaching your clients to resource. And then from there, we look at more long-term interventions. So those are some of the pieces that relate to what we're speaking about. Out there are also many different nature-based programs that we have, both trainings for practitioners as well as retreats and programs for people.
Lovely. Thank you so much for creating and sharing all of these wonderful resources with the world.
Thank
And
you.
as a reminder to everyone watching and or listening, you can click the button below, head over to Katie's website, check out that meditation or any of those other lovely resources. And then are there any final insights or a final message that you would like to leave us with today, Katie?
Ooh, I think I would just say sort of what I said with the last piece is I feel so much hope and trust in the wisdom of our body minds and our lifelong experience to shift and heal and just offering that hope and possibility to people.
Lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that hope with us today, reminding us that there is good in the world if we learn how to be able to see it and look for it. So thank you so much for joining us at AVAIYA yet again, Katie.
Thank you.
Yes. And I also want to thank our AVAIYA students for tuning in, joining us today. And we will see you all again real soon. Take care, everyone.
AVAIYA has changed my life.
AVAIYA has made me the woman I am today.
AVAIYA is my home.
AVAIYA is personal freedom.
AVAIYA is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about AVAIYA.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, AVAIYA, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.